Hey YouTube, welcome back to another History Teacher Reacts video with Mr. Terry. Alright, today we are jumping back into Overly Sarcastic Productions. I've just barely scratched the surface on this channel, but I see it's very, very popular. I get recommended all the time. And kind of looking through their videos and stuff, they got a lot of cool historical things. And I was kind of looking through at what you guys have really liked from them and what are their more popular videos. And I thought one would be interesting for my perspective and hopefully for yours is this one on Heracles, or probably better known as Hercules. And so the Greek mythology is fascinating and really seems to be something that even just regular, not necessarily like history buffs are into and know at least something about. It's popular in media and film and movies and all that kind of stuff. And I've always been fascinated, not with just like what they believed, but how do these myths and these legends come to be, right? One possibility that people like to talk about with these kind of myths, how they develop, is these people like, someone like Heracles was possibly a real person at some point, maybe some great soldier. And then legends grow, and through oral traditions, those stories just get bigger and bigger till those figures become like godlike. And very likely possibility for myths and especially the hero figures of history there. But don't want to load too much here of my feelings on the at the front end here. Let's get into the video. Okay, the original video is down below. You guys recommended this to me a lot, so make sure that you are supporting their channel. The original video link is down below, so give it a view, like, subscribe, all that support over there. And let's go ahead and get started with some Heracles.
Well, what's the point of me doing this one? Everyone already knows Hercules. He's basically ancient Greek Superman with a healthy dose of modern sports stardom, right? Did 12 cool things, got the girl, called it a day. Couldn't be simpler.
Well, no. Hercules is a lot of things, but simple is not one of them. First of all, Hercules is the Roman hero. Heracles is the original Greek version, named for the glory of Hera and an ineffectual attempt to keep her from trying to murder him.
That's interesting. Yeah, so what people often get mixed up, the Greek or Roman gods, and I mean, getting a mix sometimes, but sometimes don't realize they're the same person. A lot of because the names are quite different if you have Zeus versus Jupiter, right? Or something like that. But Hercules, Heracles. So Hercules is Roman. I actually didn't know that. I heard the term Heracles. I just thought that was more like the real name. They were both Greek, but okay.
Surprisingly, they are pretty distinct. Second of all, remember this word?
I've talked about how hubris was the most common character flaw for Greek heroes. They'd
Think too highly of themselves, try to be gods, and end up getting smacked down for their sins.
So far, we've only seen one major subversion of this, which was Perseus, who basically didn't have any flaws. But Heracles is also a subversion because his biggest flaw is wrath.
How unexpectedly modern, right? Well, Heracles begins his life, as so many heroes do, with Zeus spotting a fine-looking lady, this one by the name of Alcmene.
Zeus does it.
So that's the famous thing, right? Zeus has lots of children, both god and demigod, because if he has a child with a human, then they're considered to be like part god. But it's interesting because when people think of gods in the modern sense, more of like the monotheistic gods, these gods are benevolent, perfect beings. But to the Greeks, and actually a lot of polytheistic religions, they viewed their gods as having a lot of human characteristics in a way. But the difference is that they're very powerful. So if you anger, a god, that's pretty bad because they will smite you, right? They aren't always benevolent, they're actually malevolent, so good versus kind of evil. And yeah, they're fickle, they get jealous, and they're often unpredictable. And where that might tie in a lot of ways is this. Gods in the ancient, especially in the ancient world, were likely kind of invented in a way to explain phenomena, natural phenomena, right? Especially disasters. You got floods and storms and earthquakes and stuff. And a lot of people think that these are gods. And if they have these kind of unpredictable, destructive qualities, maybe that's a reflection of their character. So that might be a reason why you have that sort of personification and like character of these gods, as they represent disastrous random events in nature.
this thing and shapeshifts into her husband, Amphitryon, and gets her pregnant.
The very same night, her actual husband scoots on by and does the same thing.
That's right, today's first plot twist is that Heracles had a twin. So Hera is livid, as she
I did
always
not
is
know
when
that.
Zeus pulls this kind of nonsense, but this time she's extra miffed and starts trying to take as many petty revenges on the babies she can possibly think of.
Priority 1 is screwing Heracles out of his birthright. So the night Heracles and his twin are slated to be born, Hera convinces Zeus to make the next descendant of Perseus to be born the king. Now,
So you'd wonder, yeah, if Hera would get jealous, because Zeus is very obviously sleeping around and doing all that stuff. Is Hera just kind of, sounds like she was kind of angsty, you know?
Alcmene is one of Perseus' descendants, meaning Heracles is slated to be the next descendant of Perseus, so Zeus is totally okay with the idea, whereupon Hera zips down and kidnaps Alethea, the goddess of childbirth, to keep Heracles and his brother right where they are until the day is done. Then she causes Heracles' cousin Eurystheus to be born prematurely, so he gets to be the king instead. Fortunately, Alcmene gets to give birth eventually because one of her servants tricks Alethea into bailing, whereupon Hera turns the servant into a weasel as revenge.
The family still keeps her around though, which is nice.
Anyway, Alcmene is acutely aware of the fact that the baby is already a problem for her and will probably only cause more problems later on, so she kicks him out, whereupon Athena scoops him up and ferries him over to Hera, telling her that someone left this poor baby just lying around, whereupon Hera pities the little guy and nurses him a bit. Unfortunately, Heracles is a toothy baby and boob noms a little too hard. Hera chucks him because ow, but the damage is done, because her magic milk has given him superpowers, making him crazy strong. Athena takes the
You wonder, you know, because it's generally more likely with these kind of stories that pieces of the story get added as as generations going on. But you wonder in those cases if somebody literally just sat down, right, with their pad and paper here and made the whole story like in one sitting, you know what I mean? It's like, all right, there's Heracles, and his father is this and did this, and then he was getting breastfed by his mother, and he hurts her and doing all this stuff. I think that would be interesting just to see the mind of someone like that. But again, it's probably more likely that these stories kind of build. Now, a question I do have is what is the earliest textual evidence for Heracles? Now, much of the Greek pantheon predates the Greeks as we know them and definitely goes back to Mycenaean, which a group, kind of before the Greeks. They're kind of the pre-Greeks, if you want to call them that basically end up getting, they kind of go away, especially around the Bronze Age collapse. But we know a lot of the Greek stories came from that, right? So of course you get like Homer and things like that, but those were passed down orally and don't get into writing till much later. So I'm wondering what some of the evidence is the not evidence necessarily, but first like appearances in the historical record of Heracles. If you know, let me know. No, I know we got mythology, Greek mythology buffs out there.
Little guy back to his parents, and they raise him pretty uneventfully, except for that one time with the snakes. So prior to the 12 tasks thing, Heracles' story is a little muddled, which is pretty common for culture heroes. They tend to accumulate stories over time. The main highlight is one time teenage Heracles gets pissy because he's having trouble learning to play the lyre and ends up killing his teacher as a result. Then
this is the story. Sorry if I'm pausing too much here on this. What I like to, in my class, to teach mythology, one exercise I like to do with the class is play the telephone game. You guys played that? Where you tell somebody, right? You tell somebody a statement or phrase, and then they tell it to somebody, and it's like one at a time, right? And then if you played that game, you probably know that by the time you get to the end of the class or the group, the message is a little bit different. Now, whether that's somebody doing it on purpose or just misremembering, or you hear something different than was interpreted, it's not a perfect analogy because, if you're actually putting it in writing, it's a lot easier to put that down. But you got to remember that most of these stories, like I was saying before, were oral before they were written. And it's obviously more easy to mess with a myth that's orally passed, right? Because it's all, memory, even though I might hear it a bunch of times. But that's an activity I like to do. And I would suggest doing that in your classes, suggesting it to your teachers or groups or whatever. And then you can kind of understand a little bit of how these kind of stories grow.
Then a while later, he ends up in Thebes, where he courts and marries Megara, the daughter of King Creon. They have 2 beautiful children, whereupon Hera drives Heracles crazy, and he kills all 3 of them. He gets his brain back, is immediately stricken with grief, and goes to consult the Oracle about what he should do to atone. The Oracle, guided by Hera, tells him he needs to atone for his crimes by serving his cousin, King Eurystheus, for 10 years and doing whatever he tells him to. This is all part of her cunning plan to accidentally make Heracles the most famous and revered Greek hero ever, because nobody ever just kills kills anybody in these stories. So this leads to the famous 12 labors, or rather 10 plus a couple extra. Initially, Eurystheus gives him 10 labors, but 2 of them get discounted for shenanigans. Number 1 is to kill the Nemean lion, known for being immune to all mortal weapons,
And having the general disposition of a chainsaw strapped to a ceiling fan.
Heracles ends up strangling it and skinning it with one of its own claws.
Mission number 2 is killing the Lernaean Hydra, for which Heracles conscripts his half-nephew and sometimes lover, Iolaus, for moral support.
That happened a lot in ancient Greece, don't question it.
Anyway, after learning that cutting off the heads just causes more heads to grow back, Iolaus suggests using fire to burn the neck stumps, which works really well. Before they leave, Heracles takes some poisonous Hydra blood and coats his arrows with it.
Because why not, right? With that out of the way, Heracles returns home, but Eurystheus is all, hey, you got help for that one, dude, doesn't count, and adds another trial for later. So trial number 3 is to capture, alive this time, the Ceryneian hind, a deer sacred to Artemis. Eurystheus' cunning plan here is to have Heracles offend Artemis and get her to kill him. But as soon as Heracles explains what's up with his trials and such, Artemis is like, yeah, dude, go for it, just bring her back when you're done. So Heracles brings the hind to Eurystheus, but Eurystheus is too slow to actually catch it, and it zorps back to Artemis no problem. Mission accomplished. Mission 4 is to capture the Erythmanian boar, but Heracles gets distracted along the way and parties it up with a centaur friend for a while instead. Unfortunately,
So you wonder if this stories too, you're talking about origination stories, because a lot of these aren't necessarily like battles, was this person maybe like a almost semi-mythical hunter that was known for these stories of their hunting these giant boars and or any other type of wild animal. You see how that could possibly like an explanation for an origin there, and then it just becomes it snowballs over time and over generations.
centaurs apparently don't know that Greek wine needs to be watered down before it's drinkable, so they all get super drunk and then start trying to pick fights. Heracles drives him off with his poison arrows, but his centaur buddy accidentally drops one on his foot and dies. Well, that was kind of pointless. Anyway, after that fiasco, Heracles visits the immortal centaur Chiron for advice, who tells him that the boar is impossible to stop while charging, so he needs to drive him into the snow to immobilize him and then carry him off.
Where do you think centaurs come from? Like where that mythology comes from? Because again, a lot of it comes from somewhere. Is it just someone that was like on their horse so much it felt like they were blended together? Like they were, somebody took it like took a metaphor to be realistic. We're like, man, this guy was so good, on horseback that it was like him and the horse were one. And then all of a sudden that someone interprets that to mean like, oh, they were like physically one. I wonder.
So Heracles does, and brings the boar back to Eurystheus, who immediately freaks out and makes him release it back into the wild. Mission number 5 is to clean the stables of King Augeas, which are filthy. So Heracles first gets the guy to promise him 10% of his prize cattle if he manages to pull it off, then diverts 2 rivers through the stables and cleans them out super efficiently, surprisingly not demolishing the building in the process. But Augeas is a sore loser and refuses to pay up, so Heracles and Augeas' son Phyleus take him to court, whereupon he sidesteps all that legal nonsense by banishing them both, because he is the king. And then Eurystheus refuses to credit the trial because Heracles did it for pay, even though he didn't get paid. Heracles gets pretty pissed and kicks Augeas out of the kingdom and makes his son Phyleus the king, then takes his cows and goes home. Mission number 6 is to drive out the Stymphalian birds from the swamp they live in, which he does with a little divine help. Athena has Hephaestus make him a special rattle to frighten the birds into the air, whereupon Heracles is free to shoot them down.
People ask me a lot like what my favorite god is. I like Hephaestus, the god of like forgery. He makes weapons and stuff, and I believe the story thing. Maybe I should probably find a video on him to react to, because I actually want to learn even more. It just sounds like such an interesting story, because from what I understand, he's born and he was like super ugly. So Zeus is like, dude, you're out of here, and throws him, and he throws him into a volcano. And there he basically lives in the volcano and uses the volcano as like a forge, and he makes weapons and stuff, from what I understand, the basic story. But I always thought that was really interesting. But then doesn't Zeus or something like feel bad for him, and then hooks him up with Aphrodite, who's like the most beautiful god, but Aphrodite hates it and basically just cheats on him with Ares, god of war. So all things I'm trying to remember. But I always liked what I had heard about the Hephaestus story.
Trial 7 is to capture the Cretan bull, mostly known for being the father of the Minotaur. Ew. So Heracles wanders into Crete and asks Minos if he can take the bull, which Minos is fine with, since that stupid bull has done nothing but wreck stuff ever since it got there. So Heracles picks him up and brings him back, whereupon the bull breaks loose and wanders around Marathon for a while before dropping out of the story completely. Trial 8 involves capturing the mares of Diomedes, which is complicated by the fact that the mares mostly eat people, and they're very hard to control. Heracles ends up isolating them on an island he dug out for just that purpose, then kills Diomedes Hades and feeds him to the horses to calm them down. This chills them out enough that it's easy for him to bring them back. Trial number 9 is to retrieve the girdle of Hippolyta, queen of the Amazons. Fortunately, Heracles being Heracles, this isn't too hard, as Hippolyta takes one look at him and quite willingly drops her clothes. However, Hera decides this was too easy and spreads a rumor among the Amazons that Heracles intends to kidnap their queen. They dogpile on him, and in the chaos, Heracles kills Hippolyta for some reason and bails with the girdle. Mission 10 is to steal the cattle of Geryon. Unfortunately, he lives on the other side of a stupid hot desert, and Heracles gets so grumpy and overheated that he fires an arrow at the sun. Fortunately, Helios finds this charming rather than intimidating, and loans Heracles his sun chariot to get him there faster. So Heracles touches down on Erythia, whereupon he's attacked
It's going fast. It's going too fast for you guys.
by Orthus, the two-headed dog, who he kills. Then Erythia, the cattle herd, hears the commotion and comes by to help, and gets killed too. Finally, Geryon comes out in full battle armor and is, you guessed it, killed. So Heracles scoots back with the cattle
Dude,
after
he's
taking
so
an extra
good.
year to round them all
OP.
up because Hera thought it'd be
OP
funny to send a
Heracles.
gadfly to spook him. Eurystheus then sacrifices the cattle to Hera, which does nothing to soothe her nerves. Trial number 11 is to retrieve apples from the Garden of the Hesperides, which is complicated somewhat by the fact that the location of the garden is a secret. So Heracles wrestles the location out of Nereus, the old man of the sea, and heads off. On the way, he runs into this dude Antaeus, who's immortal, but only so long as he's touching the earth. He challenges Heracles to a wrestling match, and when Heracles realizes he can't beat him
Wrestling?
by pinning him, he just picks him up and crushes him. Anyway, so Heracles reaches the Garden of the Hesperides, but he can't get the apples because the tree is guarded by this big dragony thing named Ladon. Fortunately, nearby is the Titan
It's like
Atlas.
there's so much content to these stories. How do you keep, like, how much time needs to, how many generations, how much time needs to pass to keep getting these? Because they're so specific too. It's so interesting about mythology, how like detailed it can get.
Busily holding up the sky. So Heracles is like, hey buddy, hey! Yeah, wanna do me a solid and grab me some apples? And Atlas is like, sure dude, but you'll need to carry this. Sky ain't gonna hold itself up, you know? So Heracles tags in and holds up the sky while Atlas scoots over to the tree and picks some apples. So Heracles is like, yo, thanks man! Hey, can you tag back in? And Atlas is like, you know, actually, how about you just tell me where to take these and I deliver your apples for you? So Heracles is like, oh man, that just sounds great, but you know, my cape's getting really uncomfortable.
Kinda
Could you,
heavy, too.
Tag in for a second so I can adjust it and then we'll swap back out. And Atlas is like, what could go wrong? And takes back the sky, at which point Heracles obviously bails. For his 12th and final labor, Eurystheus straight up tells Heracles to go to hell and kidnap Kerberos. So Heracles traipses down to Hades, whereupon he bumps into Theseus and Pirithous, still fused to their chairs. They ask him for help, so Heracles frees Theseus, but when he tries for Pirithous, there's a huge earthquake, which he takes as a sign that he should probably leave him there. So Heracles heads deeper into the underworld and encounters Kerberos, along with Hades, who asks him what exactly he thinks he's doing. So Heracles tells him he's here to kidnap his dog, and Hades tells him okay, but he can't use any weapons to do it, which Heracles is fine with because, again, wrestling. So he bear hugs one of Kerberos' heads until he gives in, and I guess Hades objects or something because most tellings of the story involve Heracles shooting him for some reason. So Heracles drags Kerberos out to Eurystheus, who is unsurprisingly so terrified that he demands Heracles return him immediately. So Heracles carries Kerberos back to Hades and goes on his merry way, finally free of his service
did
to
it.
Eurystheus.
Reward
Now,
time.
Heracles' story doesn't end with his labors. He has all kind of hijinks, frankly too many to list here. A lot of those hijinks were romantic. He was married 4 times, his third wife being the one to kill him. And one noteworthy thing is that Heracles, as a symbol of pure masculinity for Greece, had a lot of dude lovers too. Because what's manlier than 2 men? Apparently in Plutarch's time,
You wonder if are they just saying that he was like hard to live with? It's like nobody actually wanted to be married to him for very long.
it was customary for male couples to worship at the tomb of Iolaus, who was widely considered to be Heracles' primary boyfriend, which is kind of sweet. But anyway, I kind of glossed over the fact that he dies somewhere along the line, so let's talk about that. Heracles is on marriage number 3, and his wife is this lady Deianira. For those of you who know Greek, her name is a spoiler, as it translates to husband destroyer. So one day, this centaur Nessus decides to kidnap her, which Heracles obviously objects to. He shoots the centaur with one of his old Hydra blood arrows, and the poison centaur tells Deianira that his blood can totally make a potion to keep her husband faithful should she ever need such a thing. He persuades her to bottle some of his blood and then dies. This becomes relevant several years later, when Heracles falls in love with this other lady, Iole. Deianira remembers the love potion thing, takes some of the blood, and smears it on the inside of one of Heracles' tunics. Whereupon, because it's full of hydrovenom and very, very poisonous, the blood melts into Heracles' body and seriously f***s him up. He's too tough for it to kill him,
Owie.
but it really hurts, so he kinda decides to die anyway. Heracles throws himself into a funeral pyre
I had
and
no
burns
idea.
away his mortal half, becoming a pure god and ascending to Olympus in the process, whereupon he marries Hebe, the goddess of youth. Philoctetes, the guy who lit the pyre, gets gifted Heracles' poison arrows and later uses them to kill Paris in the Trojan Wars.
So if you're a demigod, which there's supposed to be a bunch of them, you can, upon your physical death, you can actually become a god. But are you still just like half god? Do you get some other half? These are the questions that are like totally not important, but are interesting.
So I guess some good came of all this. Hercules, hero of song and story.
Oh gosh, is this like all the I couldn't fit it in the video stuff? One of Heracles' adventures I didn't discuss here is Gigantomachy, a battle between the Olympians and the giants. Apparently, there was a prophecy that the giants couldn't be killed by gods alone. They needed the help of a mortal. Heracles, technically qualified. Why would they need humans, though? Okay, the descriptions of the gods fighting is pretty crazy, too.
Hercules, winner of ancient glory.
Poseidon throws an island at a guy. A whole island. Here, throwing, Hera at you. Boom, or something. Athena tears off this one guy's skin. Dionysus smacks a dude with his ivy staff. Dude, it's like all the gods are teaming up here. It's like the Avengers. Hermes borrows Hades' helm of invincibility. Even the fates get in on the action and club a couple giants. Nice. And then the patrons. The real gods. Thank you to my patrons. You guys are awesome.
His might with the strength of 10 ordinary men. Hercules, people are safe when near him. Hercules, only the evil fear him. Softness in his eyes, iron in his thighs, virtue in his heart, fire in every part of the mighty Hercules.
Well, what's the point of me doing this one? Everyone already knows Hercules. He's
All right. Awesome. Okay. That was fun. I mean, that was way more detail that I would be able to consume in one sitting, but that's cool too. Seeing the tasks. I didn't know a lot about what some of those individual tasks were. And again, I kind of gave my thoughts a bit about how, a lot of them seemed like you had to take out some, large animal or something like that. But then you bring in the other gods with Atlas. I didn't know that one because I know he holds things up or whatever. And I know he traded places with him, and it looks like Atlas wanted a break. I thought that was kind of funny. And then he's wrestling Cerberus, the multi-headed dog down there, and all that stuff. And then she said that he Heracles kind of decides to die, and then he becomes more. I don't know. He had all the different wives and husbands. So holy crap, I learned a ton about Heracles right there. And again, like I said repeatedly in the other times, more than a lot of the details of the story, I'm very much interested in how myths develop. I love the what you call historiography, which is you study how the history of something has changed in a way, like how something has been taught as history. So, would the story that we're hearing about Heracles right now have been the same one we would have heard 1,000 years ago, 2,000 years ago? Right? If we're going to Mycenaean, are we pushing 3,000? Is it predates that? Which again, a lot of, I know the mythology and religion of the Greeks does that. Predates them even. So it came down before them. Anyway, great stuff. Thank you for recommending, again, this channel. It looks like we got some good stuff there. I like what she's doing there. I think I saw in other videos, there might be like a male host too. Maybe they trade back and forth. Or they have different specialties. It looked like some of the videos they do were like literature and stuff like that. So I'll have to see what kind of a little bit more about what this channel's about. But they have like 1.25 million subs, so they're doing something right. And if there's history to be had, then I won't be far behind. All right. And with that, a few announcements on the way. If you're really into Greece and want to join me in some of my some other Greece-related content, you might want to join our gaming channel, where currently right now, here in June of 2020, I'm doing a playthrough on the gaming channel, Mr. Cherry Gaming channel, of Assassin's Creed Odyssey, which does a lot of the mythological stuff. So that's very cool. Link down is down below if you'd like to get involved in that. Thanks to the patrons that are patronizing sort of our patron levels. If you're watching this currently, we just launched some new tiers, some more availability to get stuff, and more stuff you can get back. Now certain tiers can give you merch, cool history merch that we got designed for us. But anyway, join our Discord community. All right, with that, we'll see you guys later. Bye.